are now listening to the Rapport Podcast Network.
The Oklahoma Sooners have lost a lot in the transfer portal, but who are we targeting? Who are we going after in the transfer portal? Let's talk about it here on the Sooner Spotlight. Sooner Nation, welcome into another episode of the Sooner Spotlight, your all-access pass to all things Oklahoma Sooners athletics. I'm your host, Josh Mahler. You can find me on X, formerly known as Twitter. That's at @RealJoshMahler for all the updates on the show and so much more. Go check out over there because we also have a giveaway going on right now. If you're an Oklahoma fan or even a Navy fan or just a college football fan in general and want to go watch a bowl game, you can get 2 free tickets. That's right, 2 free tickets on the house by going over to Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it right now, going over to my profile page. I've got it pinned right up to the top. All you have to do is show a screenshot that you are subscribed to the channel. So hit that subscribe button, take a screenshot, go over to X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, and comment on that post. I will have a link to that exact post down in the comments down below, so make sure to check that out, down in the description. Make sure to check that out, go over there, and that's all you got to do. So read that post. All you're doing is taking a screenshot. So hit that subscribe button. If you have been watching the Sooner Spotlight for quite some time, if you've been one of the regular listeners, then make sure to include that maybe in there because that's something that we want to give back to you guys for helping us be so successful here on this podcast. Let's get started with that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell if you'd like to be notified anytime that we have new updates on any kind of new content released for you regarding the Oklahoma Sooners. And we are on Apple Podcasts and Spotify now, so if you would just take a quick moment to go over there to follow, subscribe, or whatever it is over there on the podcast, wherever you listen to your podcasts, and give us a 5-star review. That helps us out so much. We appreciate all of you guys so much for all the help so far. Like I mentioned, we have had several players enter the transfer portal, and that seems to be just about the only news that we get is how many players are entering the transfer portal and leaving Oklahoma, and we've lost some that we definitely don't want to lose. We've lost quite a few, and it feels like a complete overhaul on the offensive side of the ball, specifically in the wide receivers. But who are we getting in the transfer portal? So far, no commits. So far, nothing. As of the moment of me recording this right now, no commits. Nobody's really made it very obvious that they're coming to Oklahoma. There's some that there's a lot of speculation on, and really everything that we've got right now is all speculation. It's all kind of inside news that we don't have any kind of new information on. But we can take a look around the nation. So first of all, something that I think we need to understand in today's college football is just the fact that there are 2 sides of players transferring in and transferring out. The first side being that they may just want to give up on the university. There might have been something that caused them not to appreciate their time here at the university for whatever reason. Maybe it was something in the coaching staff. Maybe it was something in the medical staff, which we've talked a little bit about. I don't think there's a whole lot that has been separated ties between the Oklahoma Sooners players. There's been some that I just feel like they probably aren't going to get the playing time that they want here. And I can understand that. I can understand that you are a great player and you feel like you deserve to be playing somewhere. I can understand that. That's the side that I think a lot of us don't really like to see is players just kind of give up on a team for one reason or another. But that does happen, and that's happened to the Oklahoma Sooners so far. And the other side is NIL. And NIL is what we need to understand is the NIL deals that they're signing. Oklahoma has to sit down and have meetings with their current players and try to recruit their own players back. And right now is such a hard time really for any program because they're trying to recruit these players back while also preparing for a bowl game. And then on top of that, right around recruitment season, where we just had National Signing Day and all kinds of great players there that we were able to go after and pick up and sign. But you've got to have these meetings with players and try to recruit them back to Oklahoma and offer them NIL, and that's something that Oklahoma wants to dive into more. And we have had all kinds of outside help and now hiring specific help for the NIL going forward, and so that's something that we are working on. I believe last I checked, Oklahoma's like in the top 10, top 15 in how much they are willing to spend and what budget that they've put together specifically for NIL, which is an amazing place to be at. So that's something that we have to recognize, that some of these players are going to be moving on because Oklahoma just told them, we can't offer you what you think you're worth, or hey, you can, if you feel like you can get a better offer somewhere else, that might be the place for you to go. It's not that we want to lose them and their talents. It's not that we are trying to push them away, nothing like that. And so that's something that's hard for us to understand as a fan. And it's just the way that college football is going. And if you're a traditionalist like myself, the transfer portal and NIL, it feels like we're getting robbed of what for people like me, what we grew up loving of the game of college football, specifically in the sport of college football, because I love college football more than the NFL. But let's get into the transfer portal. Let's get into it and talk first about some of the guys that we are keying after, some of these guys that we're looking at and trying to get. And the first being a wide receiver. We just had some wide receivers leave. I believe we've got 4 wide receivers in the portal right now. We just lost Farouk to the portal, which really sucks to see him go. Nick Anderson announcing that he was going to leave. J.J. Hester going on, and also Jacques Petaway. So, those are the 4 that, as of right now, as I'm recording this, the only 4 that I know of. I might be forgetting someone on that list, but still, losing some wide receivers in a position group that we really couldn't afford to lose this season. And of course, a lot of those guys didn't even really play for us this season because of injuries. Really tough to see them go, though. But we are going after a QB turned into a wide receiver. That's why on the overlay you'll see it says QB/wide receiver, because he was a quarterback at Indiana and transitioned over to wide receiver, did really well there and moved his way over, and that's Donovan McCulley. He did visit Norman on Monday, which was awesome news to see. That he visited, and apparently from what we heard, the visit went pretty well. We are competing with Michigan because he did visit Michigan just before coming to Norman, so that's something that you've got to kind of have a little bit of a competition there, and that's part of the game, right? That's part of the transfer portal. It's very similar to recruiting, recruiting high school players, but now you've got more of a proven commodity in some ways. And so you might be able to offer them a little bit more in NIL. You might try to weigh that in. And that's the biggest thing that I think we have a disadvantage of, is I think Michigan is willing to put much more into their NIL collective than I think Oklahoma's been open about. But like I said, that's something that Oklahoma is working on, something that Oklahoma is pushing forward and trying to drop as much into that NIL collective as they possibly can. So for Donovan McCulley, this is a guy that absolutely love to see him coming in. He visits, visited Norman, and from what we know, visit went pretty well. Everything seemed like maybe we have a pretty good shot. First of all, McCulley is a 6'5" wide receiver. He would be coming in as a wide receiver, but just to mention that he used to be a quarterback, and a pretty decent quarterback, not a good quarterback, not a great quarterback, anything like that, but he was a pretty good quarterback. I like that for the option of throwing him out there in that wide receiver screen turned into a pass, just keeping that kind of in the back of our minds. Of course, thinking way too far ahead because he's not even signed with the school or anything. But McCulley, he was in the transfer portal last season, and Oklahoma actually made a push to go get him. He ended up deciding to return to IU, which turned out to be a pretty good one for him. They had a really good season, 11 wins. He got a lot of excitement out of that just by him going back to IU. But even before bowl season, he decided to go back into the portal to try to put his name out there and say, hey, I want to be one of the first guys taken off the list, off of this board. He did have a strong interest last transfer portal season, about this time of year last year, when, we were trying to recruit him, and we'd built up a pretty strong relationship and a little bit there with him. He had a pretty strong interest in coming to Oklahoma, ended up deciding to take his name out of the portal. And of course, right now, like I said, a big one that we are competing with right now is Michigan, trying to compete with them a little bit in what we might be able to offer him. So that's one that I'm really hopeful on. I think that's one of the bigger wide receivers because he's productive and he's very efficient in the way that he runs routes. He's a speedy guy, and like I said, 6'4", 190 pounds. He's a pretty big dude. That's what you want. Out of a 6'5", 203 pounds, even bigger than what I was thinking. I kind of jumped ahead of my notes to another wide receiver that we're looking at. So Macaulay, absolutely, one of those guys that we would love to see come to Norman. I think he's one that's very high up on the boards, and obviously one that we brought in for a visit already. So very excited to see him, and maybe we might be able to pull him out of the portal. Another guy that we acted on very fast was wide receiver Reggie Virgil, a guy that, if you've seen any of his tape, he's very capable. This is the guy that I jumped ahead of my notes, 6'5", 203 pounds, a big dude. And that just means that you've got leverage. You put that 50-50 ball up there, he's got a pretty good chance against just about anyone in the nation. And so I think this is one of those guys. Sorry, it's 6'4", 190 pounds. I keep on jumping around on my notes, but I promise I'll get this together, guys. But Reggie Virgil, very, very good wide receiver out of Miami, Ohio, and he's one of those guys that I think flew under the radar, originally signing over with Miami of Ohio, going there. He's been there for a few years. I think this is one of those guys that we would love to get in. This past season, Virgil had 816 yards receiving, 9 touchdowns just in this past season alone. So he's one of those guys that puts up some big numbers. That's much more than even 2 of our wide receivers put together this past season. So, that's a very, very exciting stat line to have, especially from a small school where he probably didn't have the quarterback that we might be able to offer, might not have had the rest of the offense that we might have to offer. Of course, this past season may not have proved too much of that, but still a very good talent to add to this this entire offensive rebuild. Bringing in Ben Arbuckle, Jackson Arnold is now out. We're losing at least 4 wide receivers, if not possibly more. I think there's been kind of talks of trying to keep a couple of other guys around. One of those other guys being Jaden Gibson, who Reggie Virgil actually has some ties to. He hails from the same area as current Oklahoma wide receiver Jaden Gibson, so that connection really helped Oklahoma get in touch with Virgil pretty quickly, and I think that there would probably be some sort of visit and discussions here very soon to try to get him in the doors and try to secure him, because he's one of those top wide receivers on the transfer portal right now. Going on, of course, like I said, we are going to be without Jackson Arnold, so a big question mark, really ever since we changed offensive coordinators, was who's going to be at the quarterback position? Who are we going to have take over? Is it going to be Michael Hawkins going forward? And that's honestly, that's kind of where I'm at. I'm not so worried about the quarterback position as many Oklahoma fans are, but QB John Mateer from Washington State, a lot of speculation that he might be able to come over with Ben Arbuckle to this new rebuild offensive, a powerhouse that we're trying to build. And, while I look at John Mateer's stat line, I see his highlights and everything that he's been able to put together up there at Washington State, I think he would be a great quarterback to add to the system, and I would love to add him. I would love to bring him in with open arms and see what he might be able to do, especially with that he already understands the system that Ben Arbuckle is going to run. He's very, very smart, very quick. He's able to go through even his third read. He's also very smart and knows when to run. He's athletic and fast enough to get out of the pocket, get downfield. He's one of those guys. Absolutely, I would love to have him come to Oklahoma, but I'm just not too concerned, because I do think with the quarterbacks that we've got right now, especially when you talk about Michael Hawkins, if we could keep him around, I see the potential that Michael Hawkins could have in this Ben Arbuckle offense. But John Mateer is one of those. It's kind of still working out whether he's actually going to leave Washington State or stay. Right now, as we know right now, he's still expected to be playing for the Washington State Cougars in their bowl game. So right now he's still there. But we as Oklahoma fans know that Caleb Williams, he played the bowl game against Oregon for Oklahoma. That would have been the transition from Lincoln Riley over to over to Brent Venables. And so, that's one of those guys that we can look back at and see, hey, he played his bowl game here. Who's to say that he won't end up transitioning over just like Caleb Williams did? So that's definitely still out on the table, and Wazoo is doing everything that they can do to keep him around there at Washington State. And so far, from what I've heard from really any kind of reports, is that he is a team guy. He's expected to be playing their bowl game, and he's even expected to possibly stay there because of what Washington State is trying to offer him to stay around. They want to keep him there because he's a great player, and anyone would be lucky to have him around. Another name kind of mentioned real quick is Darian Mensah out of Tulane, another guy that has been mentioned. But I see Darian Mensah is one that I'm not as excited about because I don't think that he really has as high of a ceiling as Michael Hawkins would, especially under this Ben Arbuckle offense, where Mensah, he might have more experience, but I just don't think that he really adds anything extra to the game that we could get out of Michael Hawkins. And that's being optimistic about Michael Hawkins because we saw how that turned out. But no official news on Mensah or Mateer really. But like I said, I'm not too concerned with the quarterback position because we also just brought Jet New over, who would be probably sitting on the bench but learning this year and trying to get a little bit more familiar. And maybe next year even, I guess this upcoming season and the season after would probably be, let's say it's Michael Hawkins. Then right after that, we might have Jet New come in and be able to do something for Oklahoma, and who knows, maybe he moves up even quicker than that. I'm not too concerned about the quarterback position. I think being the University of Oklahoma, I think you have a lot of room to look around at just about anyone you want as a quarterback to play as quarterback for the University of Oklahoma. It's a program that's known to put up big numbers with their quarterbacks and to recruit good quarterbacks. I'm not too concerned about the quarterback position, although I might be proven wrong going into next season. So maybe we do want to get a guy like John Mateer. I think out of anyone that could be a possibility, personally, I would love to bring Jackson Arnold back and talk him out of transferring out. But if he is gone, then I think John Mateer would definitely be at the top of my list in terms of guys that we could bring in. Now, going on, obviously, I think the biggest question mark for Oklahoma this past season was the offensive line, and that's where we are going very big. Corey Robinson is one of those guys that we're going after in the portal, and one of those guys that I'm very excited about if we could end up pulling him out of the portal too, because I mean he's a big dude, and he's 6'5", 305 pounds, the number one offensive tackle in the transfer portal currently as I'm speaking, and this is a guy that I think could add a lot of talent and security to that offensive line. Oklahoma's trying to learn from the struggles that they had a season ago, really this past season, and trying to go really big in the offensive line transfer portal specifically, not just trying to rely on some of the new guys, even though I think some of the new guys that we currently have on our roster could step up. We saw that out of Logan Howland. I think, Fabechi Wiwu is another guy that we saw step up as a young guy currently on our roster. And some others too that have definitely stepped up into their roles that we love to see, and we love to see those young guys get in there and play. But this year we definitely want the big names. We're not going to go for kind of these iffy names that we're taking a shot on a guy when it comes to the offensive line for a guy that's unproven. We're going after guys that are 100% proven, and Corey Robinson, offensive lineman, he'd be a tackle. He's one guy that would definitely be a very secure get if we were able to get him out of the transfer portal. Coming from Georgia Tech, who really had one of the best seasons that they have had. I mean, if you go back and watch that Georgia game, I think Corey Robinson, is one of those guys that, you think of when you look at that offensive line and the way that they were able to push around Georgia in that Georgia Tech game going into, I think it was 8 overtimes. So, I think Corey Robinson is one of those guys that, obviously being the number one offensive tackle in the transfer portal currently, I think that he would be one of those guys that we would absolutely have a blast and love picking him up in the transfer portal, especially with some of the young guys that we do have coming in that were recruits here in this past recruiting cycle as well. Another guy, again, offensive lineman, is Tyler Mercer from North Texas, and I'm torn on this because the last time that we had somebody come in from North Texas, he ended up kind of ruining our offense, and that was Seth Luttrell. But all jokes aside, Tyler Mercer, one of those guys that would definitely be a very big pickup and a guy that we could keep around for a little while on the offensive line. I think that's what we really need to search after, is how can we make this a veteran offensive line in a year or two, and that's where a guy like Tyler Mercer, even in 2 years, could still be on this offensive line and really help us build going forward, especially here being in the SEC now. And, Tyler Mercer, he's 6'4", 290-pound offensive lineman, so another big dude that we could probably even pack on a few extra good pounds on him and really make him a lot tougher, make him a better offensive lineman. And, of course, Bill Bedenbaugh, one of those guys that could do that. But he was also a freshman All-American, one of those guys that, I love to see his name pop up on our radar as one of those guys that we might be going after. And one of those, I think he's got to be a top target in the transfer portal, especially being so young and so talented as a young guy. Like I said, being able to help build, not just for rebuilding right now, but rebuilding right now and then also being able to keep him around in the future, because he would possibly give us another 3 to 4 years, at best. At the very least, you'd get 2 to 3 years out of a guy like Tyler Mercer on the offensive line, which is something that we really need to be looking forward into the future with, not just trying to fix this season. So another very good pickup for this offensive line that desperately needs help. Going on to the last one that I'll mention here is an edge rusher in Kyron Duhon out of UTEP. Again, another freshman All-American, so a guy that's young, talented. He had 43 tackles, 7 sacks. This is a guy, if you could imagine him lining up on the other edge from R. Mason Thomas, lining up there with David Stone and Jaden Jackson, thinking of the guys that we've got on defense that are coming back, and being able to add a guy like Kyron Duhon, I think that would be an amazing addition to this to this defensive power that we've got right now. And so, that's something that I would definitely look forward to, just because I think, anytime that we can add young talent over to this defense that's proven talent, because 43 tackles, 7 sacks as an edge rusher, that's an incredible season, especially for a freshman, an All-American freshman like Kyron is. And so, I think looking at him, sources say that OU would definitely be at the top of his list if he were to have Oklahoma coming after him. If they were to offer him anything, Oklahoma would be at the top of the list, but we're not really sure that Oklahoma is interested yet. This is just kind of one that's kind of been thrown around as speculation that we might be going after. It's one that I think is a no-brainer. You add an amazing talent on the edge to be able to really get back there and disrupt the backfield, whether it be on the run play or getting back there. Like I said, 7 sacks on the season is a pretty good season, especially for a freshman. And so adding that to the edge that we already have, that defensive front that we already have, would be absolutely amazing. But, so we're not totally sure that Oklahoma is interested, but it would be amazing. I've heard that TCU is potentially a team that would really push for Duhon, trying to get him in, and so that would be a team that we would be competing against. And I think that we have the upper edge when it comes to NIL, or even just looking at some of the things that aren't really as big anymore, but things to still take into consideration, like tradition and pageantry and everything that we have. TCU does have some pretty cool, locker rooms and facilities and things like that. But I would imagine that Oklahoma would still outrank a team like TCU. No dissing towards TCU. I think they've got some amazing, facilities and all that kind of stuff. But I do feel like we might be able to outgun them just a little bit. Like I said, understanding today's college football and the way that it works, we have to understand that NIL is part of it. You can't just recruit high school players and expect that to be enough, but you've also got to recruit the players that are still on your roster, and that's part of it. And NIL meetings have been going on this week since the transfer portal opened up, where Oklahoma is trying to reach out to the players that are planning to leave, especially the players they want to keep around. And so, these NIL meetings are very important. We have to meet with these players and try to offer them whatever they think they're worth, and we have to try to keep them around, especially if there's somebody that we want to keep around. Kenai Walker was one that we had some meetings with that he ended up hitting the transfer portal. That was one that I think took a lot of people by shock. But understanding who we're bringing in, I can understand why he would have probably left. He probably saw that the playtime might get dwindled down just a little bit, especially with Eli Bowen bursting onto the scene the way that he did this past season. But another guy that we've been pushing really hard with meetings, and it seems like we might have the upper edge on, was Gentry Williams. Of course, with that shoulder injury, we've been trying to help him get healthy all season long, it feels like, and hopefully some fixes in the medical staff. But Gentry Williams is one of those that, I feel like both parties seem like they really want Williams to stay. We want Gentry Williams to stick around. And so far, it sounds like things are going really well. We haven't seen his name pop up in even speculation of hitting the transfer portal just yet. And Oklahoma feels that Gentry Williams can be one of those cornerbacks that can be at an elite level. And I've heard Brent Venables even talking about him, specifically back in spring ball and what he's capable of. And he's seen a top shoulder expert and trying to get that. And if he does reach his full potential, and especially with his health, you're looking at a secondary with Gentry Williams, Eli Bowen, Peyton Bowen, Robert Spears Jennings, and even Boganowski. And then you've also got Dolby and Reggie Powers, and at the Cheetah, this is a very stout defensive back room. If you're able to keep Gentry Williams and the rest of those guys that I just mentioned around, I think this could be a defensive back room, that secondary room that would just be very stout. So that's something that to keep an eye on, and we will definitely be on here talking more about the transfer portal, the guys that we were able to keep around, some of the guys that we're trying to keep around, also some of the guys that we're searching after and trying to get them in the doors here in Norman. We're going to make sure to stay tuned with all of this as the transfer portal frenzy keeps on going on. Hey Sooner fans, did you enjoy this video? Well, go ahead and hit that like button and go ahead and hit that subscribe button. What are you doing if you've made it this far and haven't already? You should be able to find that subscribe button over here. And then if you want to see full episodes, we've got those up here and clips right down here. So go check that out. But we thank you all so much for all the love, all the support. We'll catch you next time. Boomer.